Hey everyone, this is a video I've been thinking about for quite a while. Or well, rather, it's about an idea I've been thinking about for a while. This video won't be scripted, so you'll just hear my live commentary as I am describing the ideas that I've had to you. So, the concept for today is League of Legends and Honkai Star Rail. Now, there's many things that could mean, but what this means to me is, what if Honkai Star Rail characters were characters in League of Legends? Like, they're transposed into League of Legends, you can play them like other League champions, or maybe they're even in a variant all of their own, where it's only Star Rail characters fighting other Star Rail characters. So that's the concept. But first, let's have some fun before we get into anything serious. Me and a friend did this. We mapped every character in... well, almost every character in League to an element and their path. It could range from anything dealing with their story to their personality, how they feel in-game. As you can see, League of Legends is a game that heavily favors these physical characters, because League is a game where, well, the characters are very self-aware of what they are and what they do, and they're very satisfied with where they are in the world. So, they're bound to be physical elements quite a lot. But that doesn't mean they're the grand majority. No, it's just a large percentage. We also base partly off their combat type, like how they do in combat. Like, for example, people who really like putting their abilities on a lot of people. I'm putting, like, control mages are in here. Jace is an exception. His story, or at least what I know of the guy, he's far more of an erudite than he is a fighter. Alright, let's move on to something more serious. The main crux of the video, so to speak. So, there's Finon, and Finon is the one that really started this whole me wanting to make the video in the first place, and put together these slides. He's very similar, speaking, in terms of, like, design, to Kayle. Kayle is a character that, as she levels up, she turns into a much stronger champion. At level 1, she's like barely a champion. At level 6, her range slightly increases. She's no longer melee only. Okay, that's awesome. At level 11, she gains a lot more range, and she's way more powerful. She now should have a few items, or at least an item, and her boots. And that's pretty strong. But she's not a full character just yet. She might not be as strong as everyone else unless she's fed. And then at level 16, she unlocks her Ascended form, which is what this character sprite over here is. It's her in-game sprite for her base skin. She basically becomes a monster, and she is far stronger than pretty much every other character in the game, has the longest attack range of 650 units. Keep in mind, the highest attack range, I believe, is Caitlyn with 550 some odd attack range. So yeah, she's really strong at level 16. And I think Finon would be very similar. Finon, after all, also has like 4 different abilities. Well, number 1 is his base form's E, or his base form's skill. That could be like, is just normal basic attacks or like abilities. I'm not sure how his the rest of his kit would function, because in Honkai Star Rail you have, you know, the character's overall kit as they fight throughout the turns is, well, their entire kit. So they don't need super complicated kits like League of Legends, because League of Legends is a top-down MOBA. It's not a turn-based game. People at the highest level would say it's a turn-based game, and somewhat I would agree, but it's not a turn-based game in that you are literally physically time-locked to turns. So they need more abilities in order to survive more. I don't think League would be as successful if every character only had like 2 abilities. Like their basic attacks and and a skip. Like that wouldn't work. And then their ultimate, but you get the point. So he would be a scaler. He would be very weak early. You know, he's learning, he's trying to become stronger, he's collecting his core flames. You could have that as a mechanic. And he's a top lane mid laner because he needs XP. He needs it. He can't, like, he's like Zillion. He's like Kale. He needs XP in order to scale up and become Kaslana. And that's an open discussion about the top. It auto-corrected the top lakers. Don't know why. Top laners in general, like Honkai Star Rail's DPSs are, well, because they're in a team-based game, in a team-building game, they don't really have much sustain on their own. So, because of that, they don't really have very many characters you could say are definitive top laners. But Finon is. Finon in his ult, I mean, most of the time he has Permancer to raise Dragon to help him with shields. He's pretty tanky in his ult with his W, with his counter, or what's it called? Shen has something similar to that, where when Shen E's through somebody, they get taunted. Yeah, that's the word. Welt could be an example of someone that I could imagine as a full-on top laner, but we'll talk about him later. Blade is like, when I thought of top laners, when I was originally thinking about characters going to certain lanes, or Honkai Star Rail characters to be specific, he was the first character I thought, yes, he's a top laner. He's a top laner for sure. Firefly is another destruction, like, DPS, so maybe she's a top laner. Maybe she could go elsewhere. Like, I can imagine her as a melee ADC, like Nyla, for example. Let's talk about mid laners. First of all, the Herda is one of the characters I was like, this is a mid laner. There's no other way she could be. I imagine her entire kit is much like Seraphine. Whenever I play Herda in my teams, I always think of her E as this general area of effect, like ability, kind of like Seraphine's ult, but kind of also like Seraphine's empowered Q. And I think most of her skills would have empowered variants, or rather, maybe her only skill that has an empowered variant is just really good, and her ult, I'm not sure what her ult would be. Maybe it's something that teleports her somewhere through like a magic mirror. Like, you know how through her ult she shoots through multiple mirrors and it all goes down to one target. She's basically making the most out of only being one person. I think she'd be a lot like Syndra. That's her identity. I think she could be a bot laner, like, you know how Syndra and Seraphine characters that can go AD carry. I think the Herda can also do that. Now let's talk about Welt. I like Welt a lot. When I read the Honkai Impact comics, I loved Welt. He's an amazing character. is completely different from the Welt in Anti-Entropy. And you can really see that, and you can see how influenced he was by the one massive heroic sacrifice that Welt Joyce did. And he was like, well, time to be the hero. I think he'd be an AP bruiser, maybe even an AP Juggernaut, like Mordekaiser. But I think his kit would have some varying similarities to Victor. Maybe without the scalings, because, well, doesn't need to scale. And as he levels his abilities can give the enemy weightless, which reduces their res. Probably to AP, but I could see it other ways where it could be like, okay, it can reduce armor a little bit, kind of like Nasus's E. Or is it his W? Which one's the Wither and which one's the... I think the E is his area of effect armor shred. His ult is would be most similar to Bard, but not making them invulnerable, but completely freezing them. Sort of like Echo. And this would allow his allies to just wail on whoever gets stuck in his ult. That makes Welt very powerful. But I also think that it would have a very long cooldown, and Welt would almost not be a champion without it. Kind of like Mordekaiser. Mordekaiser cannot side lane unless he has his ult, which is a huge part of his identity. But another part of Welt's identity would be the whole control mage aspect, where he slows, he makes them more vulnerable, he basically can be a side lane team. There's this mid lane, like, mage archetype that I think many characters from Star Rail fit in. But even then, in a game like League, characters can go to all types of different roles, and they'd still be fine. Like, Welt obviously would not be a character that can be an AP carry. Like, there is no way that that kind of character would be okay at all. But there is a way he can be a top laner and a mid laner. Maybe even a Juggernaut class. Although, in a Honkai Star Rail variant of the game, I'm not sure how much Juggernaut would apply. If anyone wants to make a skin for Welt and put it into League, make it Victor. Make it Victor's base skin. That's something I want to see. But yeah, when I look at these characters, I imagine League characters like Mel to Yao Guang. Either of these two to Malzahar, Rappa to like Hui, Aventurine to Silas, and either of these fox ladies to Ari. Well, she's not a fox lady, but you get what I mean. Vladimir archetype, I'm sure that Blade, like Mornax Blade, could easily fit this kind of archetype, where they sacrifice their health for damage, Blood Pact style. All of this is, of course, ignoring the elephant in the room that I will address later. Okay, let's talk about a support. Robin is a generalist support, and so she would be most like Sona in both theme and identity. She's probably more like Lulu in terms of her like general scaling. I don't think she'd have the like mechanic that Sona has, where she has to do the Accelerando stacks. Like, I just don't think that makes sense. So she's an Enchanter's support identity. And that brings us to an issue. General supports overlap with advanced supports in Honkai Star Rail, and that makes it difficult to transpose these characters into League. A support role, especially when there's just so many of them. And League doesn't have quite as many supports as Honkai Star Rail does, which is crazy considering the fact that League has way, way more characters. And of course, for the purposes of discussion, not that we would even have the room on the screen to fit all of them, the 4-star characters are going to be mostly ignored in this presentation because I just have no idea how to fit them, how to treat their power scaling, or like how they would work as actual full-on characters on par with the other 5-star characters. So there's that. Sunday's an auto advance or action advance support. Buffs probably speed, attack speed. I'm not sure what else he would do. I'm sure he could have some kind of thorns or vines or something he can, sort of like the fiddlestick sphere that he can put onto enemies. But his ult, if anyone from Riot ever watches this is an idea you can take. I want an ult that can enable other champions' ults temporarily for like maybe like 5 seconds. And they get to use that ult, no strings attached. For example, let's just say I'm Singed, and I just use my ult to kill Silas in a side lane skirmish. I don't have my ult for a fight, and there's going to be a Baron fight. I need my ult. What Sunday can do for me is he can activate my ult. Say it's on 58-second cooldown. He activates my ult, and I can use it again and run down the enemy. I think Sunday's ult would need to be single target and also long. Or, even if it isn't long, it needs to be very fixed, a very fixed cooldown that can't really be reduced very easily by ability haste, not summoner haste. I'm trying to think of an ult that has a really long cooldown. Well, it doesn't matter. But I think this kind of ult would be so interesting for League, and it would open up an avenue of being a support that hasn't been explored before. Yeah, there is the idea that this is kind of bold, it's not been done before, but I think League needs to be bold and do things that haven't been done before. Even if it pisses off a few people, that's fine. That's okay. Part of the point is every champion almost has something that makes people outraged. That would also make people be like, Sunday, you were running it down because you didn't enable my ult, you enabled some other person's ult. And of course, that's just part of this skill that you would need to develop for Sunday. After I use that Singed ult, going back to the example I was giving previously, that cooldown for the ult that I originally used reduce by the amount of time I used my ult. So the cooldown would go down as normal. It's another ult with 0 strings attached. It doesn't delay your next ult. You get to have a whole new ult. That's what I think. Sunday could be really cool like that, and it would mimic his ability to regenerate energy. And of course, that comes to the question of other action advance supports. I don't know exactly how well these action advance supports translate into League, because basically they're only, the only thing they do is they action advance, and that's the crux of their power. It gives crit damage. Sunday gives crit rate and crit damage. Sparkle gives crit rate and crit damage. Well, mostly crit damage. Bronya just gives crit damage. Saridra gives you an entire new skill. I'm not entirely sure about the rest of like her buffs. Does she give crit rate? I don't know. I don't have her. But I think they're most like Nami and Lulu in this sense. Maybe less those two. I don't think they really look like those enchanters. Moving on. Let's talk about marksman. Boothill is a classic marksman. He is very much like the marksman in League of Legends, and he would translate pretty directly onto a character like Lucian. Maybe he wouldn't have a dash, and the reason I say that is because a Boothill isn't quite, well, maneuverable, but I think Boothill is the kind of character that he's very glass cannon-y, and it fits his identity. He has a gun, he wants to exert justice. He's like Graves, but instead of a shotgun, he has a revolver. There are other ADC, APC, marksman type identity champions, like all of these characters on the right. We have Zeri, Ashe, Kai'Sa, Ezreal, Jhin, Tristana, and Smolder. And we have quite a few characters in Honkai Star Rail that legit just use guns. Like an Axa, he has a revolver. We have Kafka, who uses Uzis. Or, well, I think they're Uzis. We have Boothill, has a revolver. But we also have some others that could be like AP carry. Rappa, Herta could also be an AP carry. High Ceilings, I could easily see as a type of like Dot-esque. You see, she could be like Brand in a sense, where so her damage is not instant, it's over time. I could easily see Firefly. I could easily see being a melee DPS like Nyla, as the example was previously. Okay, let's talk about junglers. Fei Xiao is probably a jungler. She's not a top laner. She's not a mid laner. She's not an AD carry. She is a jungler or a support engage. I think her kit is very similar to Xin Zhao's and Jarvan's, in that she's a ganking, diver, jungler, but I don't think she'd scale like Jarvan does. Fei Xiao right now, in the meta of Honkai Star Rail, is pretty old, and she needs a lot of help to be the top lane DPS that she can be. Which is not great. That kind of makes her more like Xin Zhao. Xin Zhao doesn't scale that hard into the late game, but Jarvan does. In which case, there the diving identity splits into two different separate diving identities. One's a late game one, one's a mid to early game one, and that's what Fei Xiao is. Junglers are very hard to like fit into Honkai Star Rail's like rigid DPS system. Honkai Star Rail has DPSs that just I don't see as junglers. Blade could be a jungler. I thought of that one pretty easily. He seems like someone who could, like a character that could easily fit into the jungle. Let's talk about probably one of the last things where we can talk about. Damage supports, they can be very frustrating. Lux is often banned a lot. Well, number one, she's popular, and number two, has a lot of high base damage in her kit, and also high scalings, which makes her incredibly difficult to deal with. Silverwolf, I imagine as a type of Lux in this variant of Honkai Star Rail. She would be a damage support, she could be put in mid lane because of her high damage, people tend to like that. Maybe she'd be able to do a similar thing with her ult, like Welt's weightlessness, but not Welt's ult. It would just give the defense shred. Now, of course, I don't have time to get into every single one of these characters and what their kit might look like. I could do that. That could be an entirely separate thing. I made this a long time ago. The same person I made the list from the beginning, where we mapped all the Lee characters to the Honkai Star Rail paths and elements. This is based on how we felt about each of the characters. But of course, there are duplicates in this list because, well, you can have multiple characters in different roles. Like, the same character can take different roles. I think Cyrene should probably stay as a Honkai Star Rail only character and not be put into a league game. Anyway, tangent's over. I hope you enjoyed. However long this ends up being, I may edit it down, I may not. I may upload as is, I may just not upload it at all. In which case, this video will just be sitting here and gathering dust. I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Bye for now. And remember, this counts as variety, right?